Welcome to what is sure to be an exciting episode of the IoTSSA Cybersecurity Experts Panel. I'm your host, Brian Sherman, Director of Content for IoTSSA. We have an informative, interactive discussion on tap today, covering a timely and extremely crucial topic for the channel, securing your MSP business. Those sharing their insight and advice on that topic today include Stephan Tallent, Senior Director of Managed Security Service Providers at Fortinet. Good day, Stephan.
Good morning or good afternoon.
Next up, we have Justin Kalhoff, CEO of Infogressive.
Howdy.
And our final panelist joining us on today's session is Jobgen, Director of Member Communities at CompTIA.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, great. I'm glad you could all join us today. Let's start off with a real quick, brief introductions. Stephan, tell us a little more about your tech career and your role at Fortinet.
How long have we
Yeah, sure. So started out in the MSSP business myself before moving over to the vendor side of the house, now today support partners that are converting Fortinet technology into security services. So we spend a good bit of our time helping our partners drive profitability and operational efficiencies in their practice, and that's my daily life. Good stuff.
Very good. Let's shift on to Justin. Now it's your turn. Ready to go.
When you asked Stephan to go through his career, I was like, it's long and lengthy. He's been in it a long time. So, Justin, Infogressive. Basically, we're a managed security services provider, SOC as a service kind of thing, partnering with MSPs all over the planet to help them keep their customers secure in their business.
Excellent. And our last panelist is Miles.
Hi again, thanks. I've been with CompTIA for about 16 years. Been with the MSP and IT security communities just recently now. And prior to that was with our education team and developing standards and trustmark programs and things like that to help identify best practices and give MSPs an opportunity to qualify that they do so.
Awesome. Well, on behalf of IoTSSA, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. And let's get right to the topic of discussion. The MSP community is facing a rising security threat to their own businesses, not just to their clients, which by extension, reaches out to customers, clients, everybody that's touched by the system. The danger is real, and it's something that every channel company should be taking seriously. Case in point, for those who've seen, the Department of Homeland Security issued an alert on October 3rd of last year titled Advanced Persistent Threat Activity Exploiting Managed Service Providers. This notice goes on to outline the ongoing activities of bad actors attempting to infiltrate the networks of MSPs. A real bad thing, obviously. That alert follows a similar warning in April 2017, where the agency highlighted indicators of compromise, signatures, suggested detection methods, and recommended mitigation techniques. On top of that, ransomware and hacking attacks on MSPs have been covered in numerous channel and tech news recently, including Channel E2E, CRN, Dark Reading, Computer Weekly, Channel Pro, and many others. The list goes on. It seems like every week or every other week, we're getting a pretty big named attack coming from the MSP community. So panelists, why are MSPs finding themselves in the crosshairs of cyber criminals? Let's start with Justin.
I think it's a variety of factors, but first and foremost, they have hundreds of customers. And a bunch of those are small businesses, so they lack the technology, people, and processes often involved with cybersecurity specifically. So they're a target for that reason. All of those small businesses still work with the same sort of, whether it's credit cards or patient data, all the stuff that bad guys want to turn into money. Certainly involving ransomware, they'll pay Bitcoin just like everyone else. And so crime of opportunity, some of it has to do with defenses and maturity around security, whereas enterprises have a lot of the technology, people, and processes to help them defend themselves. Small businesses struggle with that.
Very good. What are you hearing, Stephan, from your partners? We'll take a pause. Stephan, we lost your audio.
Oh, yeah, okay. I was drowning out the sound of freedom in the background there. So, to answer that question, it's why do bank robbers rob banks, right? Because that's where the money's at. It's the same reason that the bad guys are going after MSPs. That's where the customers are at. So, to reiterate what Justin said, you attack one MSP or MSSP with, 100, 500 customers, and you have access to all of their networks as a result of that. So that is the reason behind that. We're hearing more and more attacks, against our partners, and an increased level of intensity around that, because it doesn't take, it's not difficult to find out who the players are out there in this space. So being able to identify your targets if you're a bad actor is fairly simple.
Very good. Miles, in the CompTIA security community, is this becoming a discussion point? Are you hearing a lot from the members?
Absolutely. And those are those key points that have already been raised, that they've got multiple clients' data. So one hit gets you lots of stuff if you get it right. That's been a huge thing. There's still this tendency I'm hearing, particularly from the smaller MSPs. They're like, well, I can't be a target. I'm too small. And I don't know if that's really accurate anymore. The other thing that I would point out is that this is past success from these ransom attacks and things like that is fueling future. I mean, this business model's working, right? They're locking people down, they're making money, and so why wouldn't they keep doing that and finding new ways to monetize these security breaches? So it's more than what we want to deal with, I think, but it's coming hard.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead, Justin.
I was just going to add, MSPs are technologists, but they have to know 10,000 things, an inch deep and 10,000 miles wide, I like to say. Security is a specialty within that. And in my experience in working and having lots of friends in the space, they're not terribly mature around the security practice stuff. I mean, it is a difficult thing. If really big companies can't do it, imagine an MSP that has 20, 50, 100 employees trying to do it. It's a real challenge.
It goes
I'll
back
put a little silver lining, if I could, on that, Brian. Even the bad guys understand what a great market opportunity managed security services is, and managed services generally. So if you're wondering what line of business to be in, who's attacking who and why is a good indicator.
All good points. And I know the terms we love to use are, getting the keys to the kingdom, because MSPs have that, and locking it down can be very difficult. The other one is, just looking at the sheer volume of not just clients, but endpoints that they're managing is on the increase every year. So it's, making them bigger targets, I would assume. So, Stephen, let me shift this to you too. What are the primary vulnerabilities that cyber criminals are exploiting in MSPs operations? What are you seeing as far as trends or issues of problems within the MSPs itself?
Well, for one, the nature of the business is remote access, remote management, and as that by nature creates a vulnerability if you attack the head end of an organization that has multiple different routes into customer networks. So I think blanket LAN-like access to connections and resources into customer networks, along with tools that are not properly locked down, like RDP, Tallent, and the like. These are different methods that MSPs are managing different aspects of their customer network. So I think you can go really deep into the different vulnerabilities, but I think that those are critically high level ones. The way that these partners are accessing networks make them a vulnerable connection point, and as a result, I think that what you're seeing is advanced persistent threat actors are capitalizing on those methods to get into customer networks from one point.
Are we seeing it primarily as a tech issue, or also as a social engineering issue, Justin?
Yeah, I think social engineering, I throw email into that, I think, in general. A lot of this, I think it's 91% of breaches involve an email or start with an email. It's not any different in MSP's world, targeting small businesses or the MSP themselves. They're just people too, and so they're prone to those phishing attacks. From there, Stephen mentioned it, but I'm going to mention it in particular today because it's right now a problem. Microsoft released critical vulnerability on RDP, and there are MSPs, I can promise you, that still have RDP open to the internet. if they have that, they should stop that today. We're working in IR today that they just didn't know it was open. Wasn't purposeful, but it was there. So that network is encrypted today, and they have, the third tier of what I would say is causing this problem is evaluating technology, right? MSPs traditionally have an antivirus product of some sort. Lots of times they're making that decision based on integrating with our RMM tool, not the security efficacy of said technology. And then they have a firewall typically. Beyond that, they lack things like SIM or EDR or privileged access account management, right? They're using shared passwords. So that makes everything easier for the bad guy, that combination of those things. So that's that security maturity that I mentioned that MSPs just either haven't had the time or prioritizing security maturity. Makes it easy for the bad guy.
Is that the cobbler doesn't have his own shoes, or I'm trying to remember exactly how that goes, but yeah, your house is usually the last one to be fixed if you're a carpenter. And in the MSP world, it's little time, a lot of things going on. I'm sure the digital transformation is switching in cloud services and a variety of other security services don't make things easier for those that are already overwhelmed.
Yeah, technology businesses tend to, just like other businesses, wait till something bad happens to really get motivated.
That makes sense. So Forrester research recently reported nearly 40% of the data breaches are caused by insiders, kind of talking about the social engineering side. Of those insider breaches, 26% they say are caused by abuse or malicious intent by insiders, and 56% are caused more by the inadvertent misuse or the sheer accidents by employees, the things that we see every day. As a matter of fact, for those who've gone to the IoTSSA Cybersecurity Expo, they'll see, Justin or one of his engineers walking through some of these similar issues. But how can MSPs minimize the internal threats? Who wants to field this one?
I'd take a first stab at it from kind of the research report that kind of split it between the internal bad actors, as it were, and then the internal inadvertent action. I think those could be approached different ways. The bad actor side gets down to your culture and your hiring process and who you're having put in these places. Not that you can't lose an employee along the way and have them become jaded or whatever, but when you have a strong culture that encourages their involvement and gives them opportunities to grow, that's going to minimize and mitigate, I think, that bad actor side internally. At the same time, that is also going to help then those inadvertent mistakes, as people are being better trained, understand that these attacks aren't coming from, just a random teenager in a basement somewhere. These are sophisticated attacks from organizations, essentially. And so having an appreciation for that and get that training into the hands of the people who are fielding these emails attacks and fielding these different social engineering attempts is obviously your first step to stopping that. And then like I said, having that cultural, your vision of what you want your organization to be is going to help you identify good people to put in those positions in the first place.
Makes sense.
Good point.
Stephen, do you have something?
Yeah, I'll jump in just real quick. Yeah, I'll just add in. One of the things that I think that I see missing from the MSP, partner is a lack of an incident response plan. I think that as Justin mentioned, everybody's fervent to do something after something bad happens, but I think that it's important for MSPs to develop an incident response plan and understand what they're going to do if something bad happens to that effect. As well, I think it's important for them to identify an internal security officer or maybe an outsourced CISO to look at the way that they're securing their networks, their network operations centers, and their connections into their customers. You see the 56% number. I mean, if you're going to focus your efforts in some place, focus at the high numbers, right? So you've got inadvertent misuse and sheer accidents by employees. Those include some of the things that Justin and I mentioned around the different tools that are being used to connect remotely and to access customer networks.
Justin, how often do you run into MSPs having or not having an incident response plan? Can you give us some of your experience working with them?
Yeah, nearly none. A few. I've had them. I think the abuse of access I'm going to go back to my early training days, and they called it PULP. And that's principle of least privilege. I don't see a lot of MSPs adhering to that principle of, hey, if you don't need access, then you shouldn't have it. I tend to see everybody has access to everything because they're a small business, and that's how you do it when you're 5 people. But when you start to get to 25 or 50 and have 500 customers and healthcare and banks and things like that, you've got to mature your authentication practices along with that, and always be aware. Those are the quote unquote keys to the kingdom. Bad guys know that that they use Excel sheets or other means for storing credentials and RMM tools and everything else. If I get those, all the technology in the world, antivirus, firewalls, EDR, SIM, doesn't matter. I have your credentials. I just authenticate, steal whatever I want.
So it's not the technology; it's the access to the access to all the networks, and one way in. A lot of times, you can get into multiple systems.
It's an example of operational processes bypassing all security technology in the world. It's not just we're not going to solve the problem with just another whiz bang thing, right? Another tool is not going to solve this problem.
Well, we know with talking to MSPs as far as awareness training, I know that's a hot topic these days too, is implementing it, how effective it can be. I think they can be very effective through repetition and going through, but there's, what bad practices should I say are the hardest for the awareness programs to catch, and which should be of most concern? Stephen, you want to chime in on that?
I think Justin's going to have a good answer for that one.
Okay, we'll switch up.
The question is which awareness programs and what specifically to train them has the biggest bang for the buck?
Yeah, I think awareness programs overall are very useful and helpful. The question is what things from an MSP perspective are not necessarily caught by the regular awareness programs that they go through, the training.
Well, I think, I think there's kind of 2 phases to this. Security awareness training is meant for the phishing en masse, right?
Right.
Very, UPS that and FedEx this and IRS that. That's kind of the mass stuff. If it's, the Chinese APT-10 looking for an MSP, or the Iranians trying to get an MSP, they're not going to send you that mass stuff. They're going to do their recon. They're going to know who your names are. They're going to only send one email to one person, not 400 emails to 400 people. It's a completely different thing. And so certainly security awareness and training help you identify those tactics. But if they're targeted, they're going to get through most likely with a very crafted email. But that doesn't mean that we should just ignore the mass email, because those can be just as dangerous, right? It only takes one of those to get through, and you could be encrypted just as easily. It's a much more holistic plan that you will need to, if indeed a sort of nation state actor or organized crime specifically targets you. That's a whole nother level of maturity that you'll need to defend yourself, in my opinion, to those guys.
So what type of defense?
I would reiterate as well what Justin said. Sorry about that, Brian. But yeah, I think that there is an important role for awareness training. Here at Fortinet, we go through some pretty rigorous, cybersecurity awareness compliance training. I think that's important to not assume the basic best practices are being pursued by the end users, because you're only as strong as your weakest link, and it's just one well-targeted email or one mistake that an end user makes that creates a gap and a security vulnerability for the entire business. But I think that it's critically important to ensure that you have a structured path to provide compliance training around cyber awareness. And as Justin mentioned, the sophisticated attackers are not going to send some mass, here's your UPS tracking number email. It's going to be what we would call spear phishing or whale phishing, where you're going after a targeted individual. And they'll be using recon tools like LinkedIn to find who the chief operating officer or the important individuals within an MSP organization, and then go after those individuals specifically. So I would reiterate what Justin said about that. The big mass spam relay exploits being sent out to thousands of users are not really as much of a threat to the MSP as the targeted ones that look very legitimate in their nature.
Brian, I think from a maybe to get into some of the habits that maybe could be fought against, one of the things that I think that is common across both the mass attacks and then a very targeted attack is just that our desire on when we receive these emails to quickly take care of it and move on, right? Let me send something back, move on to the next thing. We're all very rushed. So I wish there was more just our training around it. Slow down just for a half a second. Read what's in that email. Does this smell funny a little bit? I mean, even the more targeted ones, there's a little funky smell around them that you can identify if you take a little bit of time with it. So I think this desire that we all just naturally have, hey, I'm busy, I gotta be productive, I gotta kick this stuff out. Here's an email, let me take care of that, move on. I think that is a factor that is often skipped over when it comes to how to combat this stuff. It's just, well, slow down, take a minute and look at that before you take care of it.
Is it more of an issue too to make sure you're doing the training and having these upper level discussions on security across the MSP organization, from the person answering the phones and your entry level employees all the way up to the top engineers? Because there's many that get it, but at the same point, there's others that may have keys and credentials to get into the systems, but not quite the awareness level of security risks that MSPs face right now.
If not just the awareness training, I mean, minimally, you should have standard processes for responses to customer service issues. You know, you don't want those folks who have lots of that interaction to be able to freewheel a lot, because that's how these mistakes can happen. So they should have some very clear, you know, in case of this type of request, this is the response, and those kinds of things. You know, your scripts and things like that will help mitigate too.
Sure. So we talked a little about. Oh, go ahead, Justin.
You know, you mentioned the frontline employees. The problem you're going to have is if one of those frontline employees does fall for the phishing and they take over that mailbox, and then the bad guy is then just going to send an email upwards, right? Escalate privileges, we call it. They're much more likely to trust an email from an internal employee versus external. Then there is none of this like fake domain or super secret stuff. If an actual employee is sending you an email, you're highly more likely to click the link or open the attachment, right? So it can be a multi-tiered approach of just getting one and then move up.
Right.
Well, how about if it comes from your IT department? You better read that, right?
Yeah.
Just look out if they're spelling Fortinet with a 0. That's a good indicator that it probably isn't legit. Real world example.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And I wasn't intending to, pick on the frontline employees that are answering the phones, but I think everybody has to be at the same level when it comes to cybersecurity awareness today in an MSP business. And it's very easy when you're busy and working with clients not to make sure those latest employees have been trained up on the risks and what to do and what not to do. And I guess more importantly is what questions to ask if something comes in that looks suspicious, and who to ask. So how can, I know we talked a little about digital transformation and the cloud and all of, the complexity now that's happening with an MSP organization itself, in addition to the clients. But as providers shift more of their own tools to the cloud, what additional precautions should they be taking?
That's absolutely a question for Tallent. I mean, they're leading the edge on the whole transformation into the cloud.
Yeah, it's not just a marketing buzzword, is it, Justin? So digital transformation is as much about cloud as it is about devices being added into the network. And I think that Justin lives this on a daily basis. I would say he spends a good bit of his time, showing his customers and his partners what devices are appearing in their networks that they may or may not be aware of. And then there was a recent study done that all of these access tools and public cloud resources that are being used by businesses. 86% of businesses are migrating workloads into public cloud environments. That they're poor password protection or really simple and easy to crack account access. And I think that people just figure it's up in the cloud, it's safe. But the devices that are in their network are storing this information in public cloud environments. The applications and data that are critically important to businesses are being stored in these public cloud environments, and access to those environments really needs to be locked down and secured. The other component is, that DevOps is a big part of the digital transformation from an MSP's perspective and an MSSP's perspective. And the DevOps tools that are being used to automate different aspects of security also need to be secured. And a lot of times those DevOps tools are residing in the cloud. So I think there's a heavy focus that needs to be put into the security of access to cloud applications. And I think that's a critical importance, a level of importance to the digital transformation from a business's perspective.
How about password management? What are some of the best practices along that front?
Password management tools, I mean, they're super easy. I use RoboForm, but I'm sure Justin's got a list of them that are also good to use. You can have very complex passwords that you don't have to actually remember, which is great, and they can all be different. So if one source is compromised for some reason, like they get hacked and the passwords are discovered, you don't have the same password for everything that you use. And I've seen some pretty scary iterations of that within high levels of the actual federal government. Someone I'll leave unnamed was actually using his wife's Amazon password for his, secret coded messages and stuff like that. So, even the most secure environments can be victims of poor password management. And I think a password management tool is a great step to take in password security and authentication security.
And Miles, I know CompTIA is very involved with not just the cloud community and others have had with digital transformation, and then your community within security. What types of recommendations are you seeing or discussions going on in those groups?
Mostly it comes down to there's still a lot of the technological discussion happening, like how do we set up our cloud pieces to separate all of the different clients and those things. That is still, at least with the smaller guys that I deal with a lot, is still kind of what they're trying to understand is what is the best way to store this stuff up in there, and seal all those holes, right? Because that's kind of seems to be what they're not totally clear on. I would encourage them to talk to the cloud vendors out there who are doing it, and say, and ask those exact questions. We don't understand how this is better or how this works, and just have these conversations, with the vendors is really my best advice to give to any MSP who isn't sure what to do on that phase, because that's right. You're going to hear answers just like Steve gave us, that they're comprehensive, they're good, and they're going to be able to give you some options of, hey, you know what, for your clients, your size, the type of business that they're in, this is going to be a good solution for you, as opposed to maybe this one, which is maybe too expensive to sell for, to your size clients or whatever it might be.
Right. Well, you've all given some very good points on, what things to watch for and avoid. Let's talk about best practices, because they're looking for that guideline, the scripture per se of here's what I should be doing in my MSP business to ensure that we're secure and that we're protecting our clients. What resources or templates or certifications, training programs, other things should MSPs be doing to strengthen their security posture?
Who you throwing that out one to, Brian?
Just in general?
Whoever.
Yeah.
We'll start with you, Stephen, because you spoke up first.
Okay. Well, I think that it depends on the level of operational function in the individual, right? So I think that at a high level, the CISSP is a great high-level security certification and discipline. I think ISC2, generally creates some great content, a variety of different certifications. And then you can get into the SANS and the NIST training, even down to the technical level with security vendor training, right? So obviously, if you're slinging Fortinet gear and supporting that, you want to have your people trained up operationally. But I think it depends on what the operational role of that individual is as to what you would be, asking them to go learn. Security plus, network plus, those are all great fundamentals, but it really depends on the role. I think the CISSP, I've had it for, almost 10 years now. So it's probably one of the best high-level certifications you can have as a leader in a leadership role. But really depends on the function of the person specifically within the organization.
Very good. Miles, I know CompTIA is doing a lot around this part. Would you share some of the activities they have going on and resources?
Yeah, so from an individual standpoint, obviously the security career path that's been demonstrated and carved out with Security Plus, CISSA. We have a pen test examination as well. So a number of different technical skills to give you those foundations and move you up the way up to be a security analysis. So that's a good way for those individuals. I've been a big fan of CISSP as well. I think that one's definitely up there as the golden gem. So Well, those are two, mineral and anyway, but that's the big gem that everybody would like to have, and it is a great pursuit as well. From an organizational standpoint, I would first start with the NIST Cybersecurity Framework as a wonderful thing to read and understand, and not enough people have. I would just put that out there. The introduction, even all in and of itself, that NIST has put together, has got a wonderful risk assessment framework in there that can help you determine kind of what level of rigor you're going to need. Once you've kind of digested that, or I think it was raised earlier, hire somebody or contract out a chief security officer. But once somebody is handling that, then look into, organizational level credentials. I'll take an opportunity to promote CompTIA Security Trustmark here as an opportunity to validate that you're doing what the NIST framework says you should be doing. And so there are ways that you can add that posture and add that rigor to your business processes, while then also training your individuals, so people and your processes all work together and are moving forwards, and considering security all the way through.
And the good part about that is that it was built by the channel for the channel. And I know they continue to look to things that strengthen and provide the best practices. So it gives you a framework to work with. And that's, I think, where a lot of providers that I've talked to struggle. And I point them in that direction quite a bit. And the channel standards that CompTIA has too, they have a security channel standard that pretty much gives that framework without the rigor behind it. But the rigor behind it is probably the thing that'll get most people to actually implement it.
Correct. Right. Yeah. What the standard does is just kind of lays it out. So it gives more of a layman's interpretation, right? This is what you're going to need to understand. And these are the things that you're going to need to do. Then you get into the full cybersecurity framework, or into the security trustmark itself, to see, all right, what are the exact kind of documents that I need to have in place, and what do they need to be addressing? And, how high does this, executive sponsorship need to go, and all of that kind of stuff you're going to pull from the CSF and the trustmark.
Makes sense. Justin, any thoughts on that topic?
Just be prepared for a lot of years and a lot of money if you're going to invest in one of those resources. A lot of that stuff's not cheap. I think you need to think strategically about what you're trying to accomplish, because a lot of those different certifications are for pretty different roles. If they're going to specialize, you should start with the fundamentals. If you're going to try and do security, you need to understand how TCP and IP work, because that's how most of this stuff begins, is how do packets move around the internet. And then it kind of goes beyond there. Like once you start to understand layer 7, and then you understand the way files, each one of those things can take years to kind of understand. It's a completely new discipline. Certainly having an IT basic foundation is superbly helpful. But it's just like health. I like to use a healthcare analogy, right? If you're going to be a physician, you've got to go do a lot of things first before you can ever learn how to do a heart transplant. And before you can be a cardiothoracic surgeon, there's a whole host of 8 years of process before that. And I don't think IT security experts are any different. Most of them you'll find have been in the business for minimum kind of 5-6 years. Generally 8 to 10 tends to be more realistic. So it's a long-term plan, not short-term plan.
Yeah, I'll chime in one last thing, Brian, if I could. One of the things that, since we're coming up on Memorial Day, one of the things that we actually do with our veterans when they go through the veterans program is, if they don't have backgrounds and they're transitioning out of the military and into the cybersecurity space, we start them with the fundamentals. And I think that, security, Network Plus and Security Plus, to Justin's point, the IP, understanding the basics is critical, right? So you start with that. What we also have found very useful is the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And that's, I think that's an important resource, not a certification or a training, but a resource that I think that every MSP should spend some time with. That's spelled MITRE ATT&CK framework. That details the TTPs that are being used by bad actors to break into networks. I think that's a fantastic resource that should be close at hand for any MSP operating out there today.
Very good. And I know that CompTIA has a security peer community working with this, where there's MSPs, vendors, and others working together. But there's also, I've heard that there's a movement among the distributor as well as the standalone peer communities to start putting a greater focus on that part, where they focus primarily on financials and building business best practices. Many of them are realizing that the security component is crucial to add today too. So I'll be interested to start talking about some of those members, the things they're doing in those groups to kind of refine the practices, adopting certain tools and things like that as well. So I think we're on the tip of it, but people are paying attention to the threats against them now. The question is, are they implementing all the right things they need to do? So I think the one last point too is we're looking at the threat matrix seems to be growing right now for MSPs. What do you foresee over the next couple of years? Same, better, worse environment, and why? Why don't we start with Justin?
I think you're dead in the middle of it right now. As we engage some of our partner network for incident response right now, they're all booked. Never in the history have I heard those words from our IR partners. That tells you that we're in the midst of something big. I think it has to do, I think ransom and crypto will be a big part of it. It could be the RDP thing. It could be something they've been sitting on. MSPs lack that visibility. I would reiterate Stephen's point about the MITRE ATT&CK framework. If you look at all of the things that they're measuring in an organization's ability to detect and prevent, MSP's security posture or stack, if you will, it isn't ready for that level of sophistication. I can tell you firsthand. And that means that if the attackers or organized crime come up with a way to automated fashion, and that RDP vulnerability is a pre-impetus for why they may go do that. I mean, they can go to Shodan and look at everybody on the planet that has RDP open in 2 minutes. And now I automate my ability to scan for RDP, remotely execute that code in crypto networks. I'm going to make millions of dollars in hours. So it's going to get worse. I'd be really surprised if it didn't get worse before it got better. And just with we're all over the nation with IoTSSA, with partners like Fortinet, trying to tell the story now for years. That's kind of why we do the pen testing presentation at the IoTSSA events, is to draw the attention to, look, this is a very real threat to MSP's business, to their customers. They can make money on the stuff. It's not like we're asking them just to spend it. It is a new revenue stream that's recurring for them. Their customers desperately need it. It's time we sort of pick up the speed before some very large scale thing starts to put a lot of MSPs out of business, or their end customers. It scares the hell out of me, and I think it's going on right now.
And for those that have not seen Justin's presentation, I think the other thing that's enlightening about it is it shows how many different ways the bad guys, the cyber criminals, can sneak in to your MSP business. There's so many different doors you have to make sure are locked, and it only takes one mistake for it to happen. How about Stephen? Same thought. What do you see in the future, the next couple of years?
Well, I see a continuation of a lack of cybersecurity expertise being available on the market. That is a big problem for all of the different areas that we discussed, right? So 0% unemployment rate amongst cybersecurity professionals, and this is countered by a shift for all businesses of all types to move towards a services orientation. So businesses are relying more and more on an MSP or an MSSP to do different aspects of their business, and that's only going to grow. But that labor pool for cybersecurity operators is not magically appearing in any way, shape, or form. So I think that intelligent MSPs are looking to partners like Justin and Infogressive to provide security specialization on top of the IT as a service type stuff they may be focusing on. When Justin got into this business, he had a full head of blonde hair to give you any kind of indication of the level of stress that security will put on your body. But I would recommend that MSPs look to, as opposed to, you can look at it a couple different ways. You can go out and fight that battle of finding the security operators, or you can team well with a business that it does security as a focus and allows you as an MSP to focus on your strengths around IT as a service. So I would strongly recommend, teaming out different security aspects, and you may find as an MSP, you're going to get guidance from a partner that's doing security on how to secure your own internal infrastructure as a part and parcel of that outreach.
Makes perfect sense. Miles, you see anything new happening around this topic within the communities and within CompTIA?
The big discussion is always around that skill gap that was mentioned, that there's this need for more cybersecurity professionals. People are putting these job descriptions together, calling them entry level and looking for 15-year experience positions. There's a lot of miscommunication happening here. And so I would also say right now, it does look like it's going to get a little worse. The immediate answer, I think, has to be in the partnering, finding people who are doing it now. So there's real growth opportunities for people who do this well. And so there is that, but they're still going to have that skill problem. And until, that gap, which we've just talked about, was going to take a number of years for people to get to the level of sophistication they need to have. So there's a good, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 year gap here between where we are now and ideally where we'll be with security talent. So we got to figure out something to do in these next 5 years to cover that gap.
It's leverage.
Yeah, I think we have to be realistic, right? I mean, somebody like Fortinet or Cisco or Microsoft, those companies have much deeper pockets to be able. They need cybersecurity professionals just like all of we do. And if you think you're going to outspend Microsoft or Cisco on people, you're sorely mistaken. Now add in the federal government that wants to hire God who knows how many cybersecurity people to defend our country. Go on down the list. Banks, right? I mean, we're at a big disadvantage, us small business owners. And so plan accordingly. And so your options really are, you can try and build one. I don't recommend it, like you said, unless you want to lose some hair like I have over the last 13 years. It will take you a while. It'll take you a few $1 million, probably at a minimum, probably 3 to 5 years. Or you can buy one. If you've got some capital laying around that you want to put to use and you have it, buy one, get a head start. Or the third option is to partner, which obviously I'm biased toward, but I see a much faster route to market. And again, I see it as a specialty, not as a generic sort of skill set that's going to be there for everybody. It may happen over time, but you're talking about a decade of time, not a year of time.
It's a good area to do a gap analysis and figure out what you don't have and the best way of getting it and the cost of getting it, because it's, to your point, it's growing. And throw in Wall Street and all of the big companies, and it's not just New York City. I mean, in middle America, the hunt for that talent is just as hard as it is in New York City or LA.
Yeah, I want a Lamborghini too, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get one tomorrow just because I want it.
Well, you can get a picture and put it on the wall.
So sell all your Bitcoin.
So with that, why don't we start with you, Stephen? Any final closing points? We had some good topics to cover today, and just want to leave it on this front.
Yeah, I think that we've had some great feedback from the panel on what can be done. I would definitely read the entirety of the threat alert from Brian's email for guidance on how to get into details. But I think that this group of individuals has really illustrated a lot of important points. But I think the key takeaway, if I was in an MSP type of scenario, if I was running a business that did that, I would certainly be doing two things. One is figuring out how I'm going to team with a company that provides the security as a service aspect that I want to offer my customers. And if I'm not going to do that, then I need to start looking at programs like, here comes the Fortinet commercial. Look at veteran military men and women coming out of the military make great cybersecurity operators. A lot of translatable skills there, so you can learn how to get access to those candidates that are coming out of the military at Fortinet. Fortinet/Fortivet, or look for companies like Infogressive that are providing a channel strategy for MSPs to offer security services without having to create all that capability in house.
Excellent, Miles. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, just reiterate that don't try and recreate this wheel. There's not enough time. There are people who are doing it well, but at the same time, don't ignore it, right? So, go ahead and if you're not reading things, if you're not subscribing to journals in security and how to just being aware of the threat alerts that are out there. That's where I would say just get off your horse, right? It's time you got to do something. So go ahead and partner.
ChannelCon is in August this year, I believe.
That's right. ChannelCon's in August. Come on in.
The cybersecurity community, you want to be there for that one. Very good. And Justin.
I think I would just say that the time is now. Your being MSPs and customers need you to lead the way and tell them they're going to need to make some additional investments in this new risk or new threat to their business. With that means there's real revenue opportunity for MSPs out there to get their head wrapped around this thing and add some new capabilities that can actually differentiate them and get them new customers and defend those that they already have, be ahead of the competition.
Excellent advice from you all. I'd like to thank Stephan Tallent with Fortinet, Justin Kalhoff with Infogressive, and Miles Jobgen with CompTIA for joining us today for the IoTSSA Cybersecurity panel. And also to remind you that we still have 3 IoTSSA Cybersecurity Expos left for this year, Minnesota, Washington, D.C. area, and then also the Philly area. So if you haven't had a chance, you can meet Justin, chances are, or at least his team, and see some of the risks that you face to your own business as well. They do a great job of framing it up, and we'd love to have you. So those events are free. Go to the IoTSSA website to sign up. With that, I'd like to thank you all and wish you a great week.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.